Okay, guys, I've told this story on here before, but it didn't really get as much traction as I thought it should get because it's actually fucking insane. So I feel like everybody has their one abandoned house story from when they were a kid, and this is mine. So when I was about 12 years old, me and my friend Jamie decided to go explore this old abandoned house. We used to love exploring her property. Her family owned like this huge, massive amount of property. They lived in like this trailer kind of that was like just basically in the woods. So we had free reign of the whole woods. And one day on one of our little adventures, we stumble across an abandoned house. So of course that sparks our interest. I'm talking about this kind of humorously, but it's not anything funny. Like, it's not anything funny at all. People cope with trauma differently, and I think mine is that. So just bear with me, okay? Stick with me. So we come across this abandoned house. It is one of those types of houses that almost like, think of Monster House. When I think of this story, I think of Monster House. Like, it all together, it was terrifying. It just looked like a haunted, scary house. We hesitantly circle the house, like hoping that nobody's inside, just making sure, just kind of scoping it out. So we're looking through the windows and we see like old furniture completely covered in dust. It almost looked like everything was frozen in time, like someone just up and left everything, like they needed to rush out. Jamie, being way braver than me, wanted to get a closer look, so she skirts around to the other side of the house to like look for a way in. There were broken windows and stuff, but they were a little bit higher up for us to reach, and also we didn't really want to climb over broken glass. I mean, I feel like we would have if we had to, but instead she spotted a little cellar door, you know, like those ones that like come up from the ground. Shit gave me the creeps immediately. But of course, Jamie didn't hesitate. Like I said, she was the brave one. So she's yanking on the rusty handles, and finally it comes open. She just immediately starts walking down, no hesitation at all, and I'm looking at her like, girl, what the fuck? But I also didn't want to look like a coward in front of my friend, so I went down with her. The cellar was like one of those kind of stone-walled basement cellars, you know what I mean? Like, it had stone walls and a dirt floor. It was not a finished basement in the slightest. Remember the air being super damp and it smelling like something super sour, disgusting, musty, and like metallic-y? I remember there being shelves all along the walls, like really tall bookshelves. Think of like old library style bookshelves. I'm sure they still have them somewhere, but where I'm from, they took them all away. But it wasn't all just books on there. Like, there were some jars that were full of something that looked kind of goopy and weird. Like, thinking back, it may have been old food, but in my mind, I was thinking like, oh my God, this is like somebody's like specimen in here, dude. As I'm looking at those, Jamie is literally just making her way through the basement, trying to find the stairs to get inside the house, and she found it. And like I said, she's the brave one. She did not hesitate to go up them. And this is when I kind of did start to protest a little bit. I said, Jamie, like, you need to stop. We can't go any further than this. She was like, relax, dude, relax. Literally, nobody's been living here. It's abandoned. Nobody's here. Everything's fine. We're gonna be fine. Let's go check this out. We've already made it this far. Why not go further? So reluctantly, not wanting to seem like a little pussy-ass coward, I followed her up the stairs, praying and hoping that the doorknob at the top would not turn, and I was hoping it was going to be locked or blocked off or something. But no, she turned the doorknob and the door creaked open, leading the way to the upstairs of the house. I will never forget the smell. Oh, I'm like thinking about it right now and I can't even like I've smelled dead animals before, but when I say that smelled like decay, buddy, it smelled like how you would assume a grave would being exhumed. Like, I just don't know. So instead of leaving, we throw our shirts up over our noses and press on through the house. Step into the kitchen first, where everything is literally dusty, musty, and gross. There's literally still food on the plates. Like, the dining table is fully set, with like half-eaten food all over the table. And in the sink, there was a bucket full of water that had dead rodents in it. Like, I think there was like 4 or 5 dead rodents in it. And the floor was littered with their tiny dead bodies too. It was stinky and absolutely unsanitary. But I followed her through, and at this point, I was even starting to get a little bit curious about the rest of the house too. So at this point, we're making our way down like this narrow hallway that led to what we assumed was the family room, living room situation. And the closer we got to that room, the stronger the smell became. My survival instinct was screaming at me to turn around, go find the exit, and go the fuck back home. But Jamie kept going, and I kept going with her. I didn't want to leave without her either. Like I said, I was scared. I didn't want to be alone either. The family room or living room itself was pretty eerie. Like, there was an old floral chair covered in dust with like this little lamp standing next to it. It was literally sitting dead center in the middle of the floor. There was also like a little small coffee table next to it with a book on it. And in one corner there was a vacuum cleaner, and in the other corner There was like a pile of crumpled up old newspapers or something. I didn't really take a close look at that. Literally, it looked like everything was like in its place and somebody had just like stepped out and never returned. I'm talking pictures on the wall, family pictures on the walls, like everything's still intact. As I'm looking around, I turn around to say something to Jamie about like it being stinky in there. And I see her looking at the closet door, which is the only part of the house that we had not looked inside of yet. And I don't know, something about it, like something inside of me, like that fluttery feeling that you get before something bad happens, like it was just raging through me. And I was like begging her, I was like, girl, don't open that, Jamie, please, we need to go right now. We've already explored the whole entire house, like we gotta go, let's go. There's nothing interesting in there, it's just a closet. It's probably like a little shoebox closet, we don't need to open it. I just felt like something bad was about to happen, and boy did it. I was right. Always listen to your intuition. I'm telling you, that song, your intuition, Girl Jewel, was right. Okay, but let's get serious now because this is where shit hits the fan. So Jamie opens up the closet door and the smell hits us like a wall of bricks. Not even bricks, like concrete, like a cement truck just fell on us and crushed us. Inside of that closet was something that I will never forget for the rest of my life. And Jamie too. We've spoken about this recently, actually, and that's why this story is kind of on the forefront of my brain. There in the closet, sitting kind of propped up against the back wall, was the frail body of an old woman. Her mouth was wide open, her eyes were half open, her lips were a bluish gray color, and literally, oh my God. I've seen dead bodies before. I've seen my father in his casket. I've seen I don't want to, like, I know what like fresher dead bodies look like. And that she looked like she had been there for months, maybe years. I started screaming. I couldn't even control it. I started screaming, shrieking as loud as I could. I didn't even care about Jamie at that point. I was running towards the exit, like right back the way we came, down the basement, through the cellar, and out into the yard. I didn't look back one time to see if Jamie was following me. I needed to get out of there. I couldn't handle it. I could not be in there. Because at that point, that was the first dead body I had ever seen. Like I said, I've seen a lot of dead bodies. This was the first one that I've seen in a gruesome manner. I've seen another one in a gruesome manner, but that's another story time. Once I got outside, I waited for Jamie, and she came barreling out maybe like seconds after I came barreling out. So we caught our breath for a second and then decided to like run as fast as we could back to her house together. We ran the entire way back to her house, did not stop the whole way. When we got there, for some reason in our little kid minds, we thought like, we cannot tell anybody about this. Our adventures are going to be taken away from us. We cannot tell anybody about this. I honestly think that our little undeveloped brains really didn't fully process what we saw. Although it was traumatizing at that point, I still think that we didn't fully grasp what it was and like the gravity of the situation, and that's why we didn't tell adults. Yes, I know I'm gonna get a lot of backlash for that, but like, no, we didn't tell anybody about it. And to this day, I couldn't tell you like the outcome of anything. I don't know what happened with that house. I don't know what happened with the body. When I told this story time before, people told me to look up on Google Maps like the exact area, and I did, and I couldn't find the abandoned house. I don't know if it's since been torn down or what, but just be super careful if you're going to go urbex exploring. Like, I know it's super interesting and I know it's so fun, but other times you end up with traumatizing stories that you'll be able to tell for a lifetime, like me and Jamie. Kids are never going to believe us.
Lindsay wrote in and she said that her mom just explained this experience she had away when she was 9 by saying there's strange people at the bus stop. But when she was 9, she was on a trip with her mom. They were taking a bus 8 hours away to go see her godparents, and normally they all traveled together in the family car, but for some reason her dad and her brother had to stay back. Her brother had a hockey game or something he couldn't miss, and her mom just figured this would be a fun like girls trip. The 8-hour trip passed. It was fun. Nothing of note happened. They get to the news station. It was the 90s, so cell phones weren't super common, and her mom had to go and use a payphone in order to call her godmother to come pick them up when they arrived. So they're walking through the bus stop, and that's where Lindsay sees this sight, which she says has now become an intrusive thought for almost 30 years. She was just standing by her mother's side, kind of people watching, looking around, and this man catches her attention. He's sitting on a bench not too far from them, and she said he caught her attention initially because he looked like Wayne Knight, who played Newman in Seinfeld. She recognized him because he was also Dennis in Jurassic Park. She said she quickly realized that it was not this person, only his hairline and his glasses were similar, but she could not take her eyes off this man. He looked frozen in the moment. He was sitting there with a sandwich in front of his face like he was about to take a bite, but he wasn't moving. She said his eyes were raised slightly above his sandwich, and they reminded her of a bug for some reason because it seemed like they were unfocused and they were just kind of looking out of his peripheral vision. She says it happened with the blink of an eye quickness. Like if you weren't watching this guy, you would have missed it. He flicked his tongue out of his mouth, snatched a piece of the sandwich and brought it back into his mouth, chewed rapidly and swallowed. She says this action took place over the course of a literal second before she could even bat an eye, and his eyes never moved or lost that unfocused stare. Lindsay tugs on her mom's coat and she's like, Mom, you would not believe how this guy just ate a sandwich. He ate it like a bug. And her mom's like, what? Like she's clearly preoccupied trying to figure out where they're going to meet the godparents. And Lindsay's like, yeah. And then she mimics what this guy does. And the mom looks at the man sitting on the bench and this flicker of like repulsion crosses her face. And she just explains this away and she says, sometimes people at the bus stops are strange. And her godparents pick them up. She's talking to them. They're like, how was your ride? Anything exciting happened? And of course she tells her godfather about the guy that looked like a bug who ate his sandwich like a bug at the bus station. And he just explains this away and he says, you know, the bus stop sometimes has strange people, and her mother agrees. When her dad and brother join them a few days later, of course she tells them all about it, and her dad kind of brushes it off, but her brother's really intrigued. And so for the next few days or weeks, they're trying to imitate eating a sandwich like this guy did. Like they're thinking it's some cool trick. She was convinced that there was a way to do it. She thought if you tried hard enough, you could absolutely bite off a piece of sandwich with your tongue and flick it into your mouth. She says, I know this really happened. I remember it vividly, and it's always been explained to me as just strange people at the bus station. But as I've gotten older, because I can recall this memory so vividly, I realize now that this man wasn't eating the sandwich like a bug. He was eating it the way that a reptile would. The way a reptile would eat a bug. And she says she doesn't know if the man saw her because his eyes weren't focused on anything or her. She says part of her thinks that he didn't see her at all, because why would he eat his sandwich that way? Like she thinks he was checking to see if the coast is clear, and that's kind of why he was looking out of his peripheral vision. But on the other hand, she says if he did see me and knew that I saw him, why would he care? I was just a kid, and who was going to believe me anyway? She said she spent probably more time trying to convince herself that her eyes were playing tricks on her than remembering the memory itself. But every time she thinks about it, she's convinced that she just saw what she saw. Upon looking at different reptiles, she says that the man's eyes resembled that of a chameleon's. So if nothing else, it's just a curious story. But what do you think? A lizard man, a bug man, or just a strange man at the bus station?
This story is a prime example as to why you should always be careful what you wish for, especially when it has to do with La Santa Muerte. The person who submitted this wants to be anonymous. This actually happened to one of their family members. They have an older cousin named Alejandro that was extremely successful when it came to the business world. He owned his own business and had a beautiful fiance named Marisol. Now, Alejandro also had a younger brother named Diego. Diego unfortunately wasn't as successful. He always struggled financially, hadn't really found his way. One day, Diego decided to go to Alejandro and ask him for help. Alejandro, being the caring older brother that he is, decided to offer Diego a job at his business. This worked out perfectly. Business was booming so much so that Alejandro ended up opening a second location. But the second location, he gave it to his fiancée Marisol to manage. Being that Marisol was going to be at this new location on her own, he sent his brother Diego to help her out. Soon after they're setting up at the second location, Diego finds a small statue of La Santa Muerte tucked away in one of the back rooms. He had always heard about La Santa Muerte and decided to do research and found out what she can do if you become like a devotee of hers. Quick little side note, one thing that I didn't mention is that Diego had always been in love with Marisol, especially after spending so much time with her. He saw her as the perfect woman and would want nothing more than for Marisol to even look his way. So he decided to set up a small little altar with La Santa Muerte and do his offerings and ask her for Marisol. Apparently this worked, because not more than 2 weeks after all of this, Marisol starts showing interest in Diego. It starts with them like being flirtatious to each other, and it quickly turns like physical. As you would expect, Alejandro starts to suspect that something is going on because Marisol was acting very different towards him. So Alejandro decided to set up hidden cameras at the second location, at the shop where Marisol and Diego were working. He actually told them that he was going to have electricians come check out the wiring, but it was actually people setting up the hidden cameras. Not long after the hidden cameras are up, Alejandro is sitting there looking at his phone at the live feed of the cameras and sees Marisol and Diego getting very flirtatious with each other. He also sees how every day around noon they would shut down the shop and go to the back and do what you would expect them to do. After seeing what he saw, Alejandro was of course heartbroken and showed up at the shop, and the minute he saw Diego, he just punched him in the face. Marisol of course runs out screaming, asking him why he's attacking his younger brother, and Alejandro tells her what he saw and tells her that she needs to leave as well. Before Diego left, he went to the back of the store to gather his belongings and to take apart the altar that he had set up for La Santa Muerte. Before he took the altar down, he cried to La Santa Muerte and told her that he regretted what he had asked of her, that he wishes that he had never asked for Marisol because this had completely ruined his life, and that he loved his brother Alejandro, that he wanted La Santa Muerte to bless his brother with more abundance and more prosperity, and that in exchange that he would take whatever punishment she saw fit for his life, that he felt like he deserved the worst for what he had done. Apparently La Santa Muerte listened, because not long after, Diego ended up in the streets, like literally in the streets as a beggar, and Marisol lost everything. Her family turned her back against her, and last anyone heard, she was selling herself in the streets. I feel kind of bad because I feel like Marisol was like an innocent bystander. Like, she was in love with Alejandro, but then this was done to her head to get her to want to be with Diego. But she generally was in love with Alejandro, but it was all because of what Diego did. But apparently, as time went on, Alejandro moved on with his life. He actually got married and had kids, and his businesses only continued to grow. So much so that it's like a franchise now. And I'm pretty sure most of us have been to his the franchise at some point in our lives. I mean, obviously I won't say what it is, but it worked out for him in the end, I guess.
Somebody submitted a spooky story saying, I watched my best friend sell her soul. I am back with another spooky story. This person said that they watched my video about the devil living in LA, allegedly, and knew that it was time for them to share their story. We're gonna call the person who submitted the story Anna. Anna says that she's submitting this story anonymously because if her best friend ever hears this story and recognizes herself, she doesn't know what she would do. Honestly, she doesn't know what her best friend is capable of anymore. We're gonna call the best friend Sammy. So Anna and Sammy met before the fame. Before Sammy became verified, before the brand deals, private jets, and invite to all these different rooms, Anna knew Sammy back when content creation was just a concept for her. Sammy was so driven and she wanted to accomplish her goals really bad. Anna just thought that Sammy was ambitious. Sammy used to say as a joke, I'll do anything to make it. Anna didn't know that Sammy actually meant that literally. Anna said that at first, Sammy's rise was normal. It felt normal. One viral video and then another. Brands were reaching out and her followers tripled overnight. Sammy and Anna celebrated every milestone together. Sammy broke down in her arms the night that she realized that all her dreams came into fruition. But then, things around Sammy started dying. It wasn't happening all at once or dramatically, in ways that just didn't make sense. Her aunt, perfectly healthy woman, collapsed in the kitchen the same week Sammy signed her first six-figure deal. And then some odd months later, her cousin was unalived in a hit and run the night before that Sammy announced that she was moving to LA. Her childhood dog suddenly unalived while she was on a brand-sponsored trip to Paris. At that point, it had been 3 deaths in 1 year. And a very successful career for Sammy. Every loss was followed by an opportunity. At first, Anna told herself that it was just a coincidence. I mean, life is cruel. I mean, fame has a price and people say that all the time. But Anna started to notice that Sammy herself didn't seem sad. She didn't grieve like a normal person. Anna says that everybody grieves differently, but it's almost as though Sammy wasn't grieving at all. She basically went on to exploit the deaths of those around her, and her engagement would spike every single time. But behind closed doors, oh, shorty was calm. A little too calm. So one night, after she hits 10 million followers, they were all drunk in her apartment, and Sammy had this glow as if she just walked out from a different world. So Anna made a joke like, what did you do, sell your soul or something? And Sammy just stared at Anna. They're just staring at each other for a long time. The answer should have been, girl, no. But then Sammy breaks the silence and says, I didn't sell mine. Anna laughed it off, but Sammy didn't. Anna says that's when things started happening closer to home. Well, Anna's life started unraveling. She lost her job, her relationship fell apart, her mother got sick out of nowhere, and every time something bad happened to her, her friend would get another blessing. Another campaign, another opportunity, another door opening effortlessly. So at this point, Anna's like, what if it wasn't a joke? What if she really did sell her soul? So she started keeping tracks, dates, losses, announcements, and they all lined up way too perfectly. Either this was the biggest coincidence or this girl was telling the truth. So the breaking point came when Sammy's younger brother died. Again, sudden, no warning, no nothing. At the funeral, again, Sammy doesn't even cry. Barely even spoke, didn't even want to look into the casket. And then she posted a story announcing her biggest deal yet.
The deal that changed everything, that took her from internet famous to television. And Anna says that's when she knew. Anna went back through old messages, journals, things that she had written years ago. Then Anna starts remembering all the strange people that she was meeting when Sammy was blowing up. Even some nights where Sammy would just go off and do her own things and nobody would know where she's at. And Anna says that she confronted Sammy and she didn't deny it. As a matter of fact, Sammy said to Anna, "You benefit from proximity. Be grateful." Anna said that she cut off Sammy after that, or at least she tried. But here's the part that no one talks about. Walking away didn't save Anna. Since she stopped speaking to her, yes, she doesn't have as much misfortune. However, something in her life feels off. She can't quite put her finger on it. I mean, considering the fact that she started dreaming about her, and she still dreams about this girl. Almost like she still has this certain pull on her. Well, Sammy is bigger now than ever, untouchable, beloved, and people say all the time that she's blessed. And maybe she is, but blessings always come from somewhere. Anna says that she doesn't know if they were ever really friends or if she was just another offering that didn't fully burn. Anna wants y'all to know to de-idolize people because you never know what they have to do to obtain the things that they have. Even you. Thank you so much for submitting this spooky story. If you have a spooky story that you want me to tell, feel free to submit it to me right here on TikTok or DMs on Instagram. I have longer, better, and spookier stories literally available on YT. I say at the end of every single video, I love you, my abducted humans, from your favorite Haitian homegirl.
Let's read another true and scary story from Reddit. Something I witnessed as a child that I'll never be able to explain. I've gone back and forth for years about sharing this. I'm keeping everything anonymous and vague because I don't want this tied back to me or my family. I've only ever talked about this with close relatives. This happened when I was very young, but old enough to remember it clearly. My family is Christian and believes in God, and while I didn't understand much at the time, now that I'm older, I view this as something spiritual and demonic. At the time, we lived in a house where the living room and kitchen were in one space. We had an old family desktop computer set up in the living room near the TV. One night, while both my parents were home and my siblings and I were in the same area, my oldest sister was on the computer watching one of those pop-up scare videos that were so popular back then. She called me over to watch it. I got startled, laughed it off, and went back to playing. She then called another one of my sisters over without warning her. I wasn't watching them directly, but suddenly I heard my sister scream at the top of her lungs. When I turned around, she was visibly shaking. My mom immediately ran to her and grabbed her. My dad started yelling, asking what she had been shown. Everything escalated quickly. My sister was shaking uncontrollably and then suddenly went limp, her arms dropping to her sides. I remember my mom looking terrified in a way I had never seen before. My mom called our pastor late at night and said we needed to go see him immediately. While my dad got the car ready, my mom sent me into a bedroom with my sister. I sat next to her on the bed and held her hand, trying to comfort her the only way I knew how. I remember quietly telling her, "It's okay, everything's gonna be okay." What still haunts me is how cold she felt. Not just cold hands, but cold in a way that didn't feel alive. Years later, after attending funerals, I realized it felt exactly like touching someone who had passed away. While I was holding her hand, she suddenly turned her head very fast and looked directly at me. Her eyes were completely black. I remember feeling an overwhelming sense that whatever I was looking at was not my sister, yet somehow still was. Now that I'm older, I believe she was possessed in that moment. We drove to the church and went inside. A teenager tried to help and gently touched my sister's hands, but the moment she looked at him, he backed away and went to get the pastor. We were brought into the main area of the church. My parents told me everything was fine, but I knew it wasn't. I sat behind my dad while the pastor and others prayed over my sister. They were rebuking whatever it was inside of her in the name of God. When my sister began screaming, it didn't sound like her voice at all. It was deep, distorted, and unrecognizable. She kept screaming, "It hurts, it hurts." Later, she told me she wasn't in pain. Whatever inside her was the one screaming. At some point, my dad picked me up and tried to block my view, telling me not to look. I looked anyway. I saw my sister twitching, crawling, and moving in ways that didn't look human or normal. I remember hugging my dad tightly, frozen with fear. After that night, no one talked about it again. Years later, when I was older, I finally asked my sister what had happened. She told me that when she watched the video, she felt something jump into her body. Everything went black, and she felt like she was watching herself from outside of her body. She said she could see both herself and whatever it was inside of her. She also told me that when she turned her head and looked at me that night, she was scared that whatever had possessed her was going to go after me next. When the prayers ended, she said she suddenly felt like she was back in her body, exhausted, terrified, and afraid it would happen again. To this day, she barely talks about it and only says it was the worst experience of her life. I'm not trying to convince anyone of anything. I just know what I saw, what I felt, and how clearly this memory has stayed with me. As a Christian, I believe this was something spiritual and demonic, and it's something I've never been able to forget or fully explain. Outside of like hearing stories from like The Conjuring and like old-timey tales, I've never actually heard of true stories of possession, so this is so scary. I will say though, I'm sure that this energy had already kind of existed in their space for this video to kind of act as a trigger. No energy is gonna come to you by watching my videos, I promise. If you guys have any personal stories you'd like to share, please email them to me and I will get to them if I can, and I will see you in the next one.
I found my witch neighbor inside my dad's house. This girl says that one night she decided to stay the night at her dad's house because she wanted to take care of him as he was really sick. She decided that she was going to stay in the same bedroom as him just to keep him company and in case he needed anything. They had already gone to bed, but at around midnight she needed to go to the restroom. So she exits her dad's bedroom, and as she's walking out, she notices that the neighbor is at the very end of a hallway. She was walking very slowly, almost as if she was looking for something. At first she didn't know who it was, but she turned just slightly enough for her to recognize the face and the clothes that she had on, and obviously she knew that it was the neighbor. She explains that she saw her clear as day, but the neighbor didn't see her. She says that the neighbor kept walking towards the darkened areas of the hallway, and then out of nowhere she just disappeared from view. She was in shock at what she had just seen, but she still went to the restroom. She couldn't even pee. She went into the restroom. She's like, I need to go with my dad. She immediately goes back into her dad's room and just lays next to him. She did try to convince herself that what she had just seen in the hallway maybe was her imagination. Maybe she was just really tired. She didn't really see her neighbor in there, did she? The following day, she went out and she saw her neighbor outside, and she was wearing the same clothes that she had just seen her last night in the hallway of her dad's house. In that moment, she knew that what she had seen that night was not a dream. It was not her imagination. Unfortunately, after some time, her dad did end up passing away. She ended up going to a witch because she wanted to confirm if that lady was doing something to her dad or not, and the witch ended up telling her that the neighbor was the cause of her dad's death, that she was doing some kind of brujeria on her dad. The witch tells them that the neighbor was very envious of them. She says that now her mom is the one that is extremely sick and they're doing everything possible for her not to pass away. Lately, she's been having dreams about her dad. In the dreams, her dad points at the window, and when she gets close, he just continues to point at the neighbor's house. If that is not a clear as day sign that somebody is doing something to you, I don't know what is. In her dream, she says that her dad is like pointing at the house, almost like accusing her that she's responsible for everything, and she understands him and she's gonna try to do everything for the mom to not end up the same way.
Were you ever just standing or, basically chilling in your place, and then out of nowhere, you see something like this, like a ghost figure appearing and disappearing really quick? If this thing never happened to you, well, it surely happened to some guys in the 90s. It all started in the late 90s in a medical engineering facility in the UK. See, this facility right here had a lot of scientists, okay? Basically doing their stuffs, experiments and all that. And at first, everything was okay, until something happened. See, one day, one of the many scientists who used to work here was working, okay? He was writing something down. He decided to raise his head, and then he saw something. He saw a tall gray figure like this. It looked like a ghost, and the moment he saw it, it immediately disappeared. Like every human being, obviously he freaked out. He couldn't believe what he saw, and he immediately went to tell his friends. He went to everyone in this facility and started telling them that he saw a ghost. Obviously, at first, nobody believed him. They were like, bro, we don't believe in that stuff. He was like, oh, okay, well, all you gotta do is to look over there. Bro, stop your jokes. This is a working place, please, and stop pointing at that. What the hell is that? Yes, at some point, they all saw it, and they all agreed what it looks like, even the ones who didn't believe him at first. But this place pretty much became a haunted place. Nobody wanted to work here, and everybody were pissing their pants. It even got worse when everybody learned that the facility they're in right now was built in the site of an old abandoned prison. They all thought that this figure right here that they decided to call the Shadow Man was actually one of the people who were in the prison and got unalived there. Now, when everybody was desperate and scared as hell from that thing, the Shadow Man, this guy kicked in. His name is Vic. See, Vic was one of the scientists who worked there, okay? He was one of them. And he never denied seeing that thing. He was like, okay, guys, I'm with you. I saw that thing. I just don't believe that it's a ghost. So when he said that, everybody else were like, bro, what is it then? The Moose Man? Who the hell is the Moose? No. That thing is not a ghost, okay? We can explain what we saw with science. All right, bro. Respectfully, with all respect, shut the fuck up. That's a ghost. Despite most people being scared of even coming near to this place, Vic did not give a shit, okay? Because he believed that that thing he saw, the Shadow Man, was not a ghost. Now, one day, Vic was working in the lab, okay? He was working, and then he saw a tool vibrating, you know, moving by itself. So at first, he didn't understand. He was like, bro, why is this thing moving by itself? He tracked it down and saw a fan. It was a fan that was recently installed in the lab. It didn't make any noise, but the movement speed kept vibrating things. When he saw this, he was like, oh, and he decided to call everybody. When everybody came to the lab, Vic was like, I knew that thing we kept seeing is not a ghost. I debunked everything, and I will explain why. See, the fan that was recently installed in the lab was moving at the frequency of 18.98 hertz. We all know that the human body can only hear from 20 to 20,000 hertz, right? Did you know that? I know that. Right, yes. Keep going. Okay, cool, but like I told you, 18 hertz is in fact something we cannot hear, like I told you, but we can still feel it. Okay, let him cook. We all know that fans at a certain speed make things around it vibrate, okay, especially small objects. But here's where everything makes sense. Our eyes are made of fluid, right? Okay? Yeah, we're definitely following. Keep going. Fluid in our eyes needs to be static in order for us to see. Yes, that's common knowledge, common sense. Come on. Here's the thing. That fan we installed is vibrating everything, including the fluid in our eyes. That's why we are seeing the Shadow Man. Okay? And I assume that everybody here knows that the corner of our eyes is the most sensitive. That's why you only see the Shadow Man in the corner. In reality, the Shadow Man is not, you know, some kind of ghost. It's just the illusion that the vibration is giving you. And don't you find it weird that the Shadow Man only appears here in this lab next to this fan? Oh, hold on. Maybe. Yeah, no, that's a ghost. And this was the story of the Shadow Man. You see, Vic tried to explain it scientifically, but obviously not all people believed him. Some people believe that there is supernatural things that we don't know yet, including ghosts. And at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what side you pick, because we will all be scared if we saw something like that for the first time.
Doesn't matter how long you've known a person and what you guys been through, because loyalty is just not guaranteed. For privacy purposes, I will be changing people's names, and thank you for submitting your story. The moment they met, Rebecca and Cynthia had been two peas in a pie. Like, you could not separate neither one from the other. And they had heartbreak together. They went through divorce together. They raised their kids together. Like, these two women went through everything together. In a million years, did Cynthia ever think that Rebecca would do anything to hurt her or her children? So why in the world would Cynthia think Rebecca would do anything to her? Like, for real. Had been for a long time single, and Rebecca was always the one in a relationship. Now, Rebecca's relationship wasn't the best. She was with this guy named John, and he was the ideal guy. He always wanted somebody new, and he could never stay with just her. So Cynthia said, if that's what men all want, then I don't want to be in a relationship at all. Until Cynthia had met Mark, and Mark was all about Cynthia. He didn't want anybody else. He just wanted her and their relationship to flourish, and he was okay with her having kids. He just wanted to build something with her as a partner. Rebecca, this was not good. This was like a deal breaker for her, because Cynthia had always been there for her whenever she needed her. And now that Cynthia was in a relationship, she had to divide her time between her relationship, her kids, and now Rebecca. States that Rebecca started saying things about Mark that weren't true. And if it wasn't for the simple fact that Cynthia knew Mark very well by this point in time in their relationship, she would have believed it at the beginning, but not now. So for her, this was out of character for Rebecca to be doing, but she just try to maintain her relationship with Rebecca because she knew her for so many years and they've been through so much together. Why would she want to let go of this friendship? That one afternoon, Mark and Rebecca were over her house, and she realized something was a little off. Rebecca was not acknowledging Mark at all, even though he said hi to her. But of course, Mark tried to brush it off. Maybe she was having a bad day and didn't take it offensively, but Cynthia did take it offensively. She's like, what's going on? Why are you being that way? And Rebecca just said, you know, why is he always over here? And she's like, well, because he's my boyfriend. Like, he's going to be over here. Like, what's wrong with you? And she said, nothing. I just miss us having our time. That's all. And then that's when Cynthia says to Rebecca, well, I don't get mad when you're with John or when you bring him around. I've never given you a problem before. And of course, Rebecca's like, no, you're just overreacting. I'm just saying that it would be nice to spend one good day with you without someone else here. After Rebecca leaves, Mark says to Cynthia, like, I've noticed that she's very clingy with you and very overprotective. Have you ever thought of her maybe possibly wanting you to herself? Like, is that a possible thing? And of course, Cynthia says to Mark, well, we've been friends for years. We've been through everything together. And I've always been single. I've never been in a relationship after my divorce of knowing Rebecca. And he's like, okay, well, I mean, I hope one day she'll accept me and she'll be okay with splitting time amongst all of us because, you know, eventually I want to take this a little further in our relationship. And it would be great if she kind of like came along since she means so much to you. That right after that situation happened with Rebecca and Mark, that she started having problems with Mark. They would fight about everything when they used to never fight. He would sleep over, she'll have nightmares. He'll leave, her nightmares will go away. Like she had no choice but to call it quits with Mark, and she asked him for a break. Now, of course, Mark was devastated because he didn't want to take a break from Cynthia, but he knew that they needed their space, so he agreed to giving her some space for some time. But he did ask her to not tell Rebecca that that's what they were doing, just to say that they had broken up and leave it there, not to say anything more, not to say anything less. Now, Cynthia thought this was kind of odd for him to ask for her to do, but she agreed to do it. So that's what she told Rebecca, that they were completely done. Cynthia tells Rebecca what's going on, and Rebecca says, finally it worked. And Cynthia says, what worked? And she said, well, I kind of like did like a spell for you guys to break up because I was tired of him taking up all of your time. Calmly asks Rebecca, how long have you been doing spells on me? Like, how long? And Rebecca says, honestly, can I tell you the truth without you getting mad? And Cynthia says, of course, you can tell me anything. Now, we know this is a lie. But anyway, let's get back into the story. She goes, well, I've been doing spells on you for a couple years now. Like right before your divorce, I realized that our friendship was really, really something that I wanted to keep safe. So I did a spell and you got a divorce. And now with Mark, now you broke up with Mark. Now we can go back to how we used to be. Cynthia says that she lost her shit. It made sense to her. The fights that she was having with her husband were weird, out of the ordinary. And the fights that she was having with Mark was also weird and out of the ordinary. But the nightmares that she was having when she was with her husband, and now the nightmares that she's having with Mark when he would sleep over, everything pointed back to Rebecca, and she openly said it. She was openly honest that she was casting spells to keep her to herself. Went off on Rebecca. She told her she never wanted to see her again, and rightfully so. I wouldn't want to see you again either if I knew that you ruined my life, not once but try to do it twice. So I would say, what do you guys think that was? But since we know who that was and what that was, I wonder what kind of spells was Rebecca doing?
We listen, we don't get scared, and we don't judge. Let me tell you guys a story time of when we were a group of 3 friends, and one of the friends wanted to bewitch the other friend because the other friend was smarter than her. So, for story's sake, I'm going to call one of the friends Apple and then the other Orange. Orange was the smartest of the group, Apple was mid, and I was the dumbest. And I didn't care because, you know, I tell you guys all the time, I never took school seriously. I regret it, but yeah. So, Apple and Orange were always like, you know, the smartest. But, you know, Orange was always smarter. But Apple was up there with the distinctions and all of that, right? No problem. As high school progressed, not even high school, as school progressed, Apple lost her way, guys. Apple lost her way. And, you know, I feel like I was the type of person that would attract smart people in my life. You know, maybe God thought I was smart and gave me smart friends. I don't know. But as school progressed, Apple decided, no man, she's going to get herself a little boyfriend. She got a boyfriend and she strayed away from school, you know. Orange's dream was to go to varsity, get her dream job, blah, blah, blah. My goal was to really live for today. Apple, on the other hand, she was living for boys. Like, she would break up with this one and you'd find she's dating the other boy. We didn't have a problem, you know, as long as she wasn't failing in school. Like, we were really okay. Like, chill, do whatever you want to do. You understand? And then, now it came to a point where Orange obviously now was the smartest of the group. She was those type of people that you did not need to ask her if she passed. You know she passed. And you know she got a great mark, right? And so, sometimes Orange would come to us and she would show us her marks, you know, and be like, oh, guys, like she would be so happy for herself and I would be proud of my girl. But now Apple One was starting to give iffy vibes. Like she always played it off as Orange is basically bragging to us, which I didn't see it as bragging because Orange been doing this before she even started the shenanigans of hers of dating. And she would be like, you like to brag, and Orange kind of shied away, and she would only show me because I wasn't being weird. This one time, Apple decides to invite me and Orange to her house, right, to come and study. And we were like, oh, okay, chill, no problem. We're thinking the girl is getting back into her groove, nice things. We get to her house, we're studying. Well, Apple was studying on her own. Orange was teaching me stuff that we learned. Because, I was so lazy. Like, I was so lazy. So Orange started teaching me stuff that, they were learning in school. And I was like, well, I was okay with that, because Orange was smart like that, okay? And then Apple decides she wants to go to the shops. And we're like, let's accompany you. She's like, no, you guys should stay here and study. No problem. She leaves us and we continue with whatever we were doing. I think 10 or 15 minutes later, she comes back with some snacks and we're eating, we're chilling. It's vibes. Mind you, we were sitting in the kitchen. The kitchen had a table, right? We never moved nothing since, we never moved. Even when Apple came back with the snacks, we closed our books and we were eating in that kitchen. Another, I think 30 minutes or 45 minutes go by. Apple's mom comes back, right? How, guys? Apple's mom goes straight to the sitting room, right? The living room, if you guys don't know what a sitting room is. She goes straight to the sitting room and she starts screaming at the top of her lungs. And she's like, she left money here and she can't find it anymore. And then she's basically accusing Apple. Guys, Apple turns tables and she's like, no, I went to the shop and I left these two here. So maybe they might have taken the money. And we're just looking at old girl like, when have we ever stolen her money? She would leave her bag with us and it would have money and we would never steal her money. So why would we start now? And why? They start, so basically Apple's mom believes her child and they start shouting at us. They tell us to take off our shirts so that they can see if we didn't put it under our breasts. They tell us to take off our pants so that they can see if we didn't put it in our panties. She wanted to go as far as putting her hands inside our, and I was like, that's when I said, there's no way you're going to do. You're not going, never. I didn't steal your money and I'm telling you now I didn't take your money. So if you think of putting I will get you arrested. Orange, by the way, guys, is a very quiet girl. She's such a calm person. She was just willing to let them do whatever. And she was even crying because she didn't do it. And I'm thinking, girl, get your act together. No, we didn't do it. I was with you. So, Apple's mom decides, no, you know what? Since you guys are thieves, I'm going to take your guys' books. Why? She's like, yeah, I'm going to take your guys' books and I'm going to hold them until you guys give me back that money. Right? So we were like, how much is the money? So maybe we can pay. She was like, it was 150 rands and we don't have that on us, whatever. And Orange was like, no, I'll go and get it from my house and I'll bring it back. They were like, oh, okay. And they chased us out. Apple didn't even accompany us. I get home, guys, and I didn't even play. I told my mom what happened, whatever, and my mom was like, let's go to Orange's house and then we will go to Apple's house if you guys are telling the truth. When we get there, my mom asked Apple to explain the story and we told the same story because my mom thought maybe I was lying, And then Orange's mom was so shocked because she's like, Orange asked me to borrow her 150 not so long ago and I almost gave it to her, but then something in me was like, no, right? And I'm like, yeah, Orange was scared to tell you, but like, I'm not scared because I'm not about to die for sins that we did not commit. No. So my mom, Orange's mom, and Orange and I decided to go to Apple's house. And we went there, it was around 7:30. It was dark outside, nah? Chilled. When we enter inside the gate, how, guys, when we walk through the gate, when we walk inside the gate, I see the trash can there and I immediately noticed that's my book. So I go to that trash can. I'm thinking Orange's book is there. It was not there. My book was there. Orange's book was not there. You can already assume where this is going. So my mom and Orange's mom get inside the house, we follow through, and then my mom is like, hey, this is what the kids are saying, this is what they're saying that you did, and she's like, yeah, they stole my 2,000 rands. It's no more 150, now it's 2,000. Sure. And my mom was like, okay, but like, why did you take their books? Why didn't you bring them to their homes and tell the parents what they did? Instead, you're taking their books. Why would you take their books? Because they need it for school. And she was like, yeah, I was trying to teach them a lesson. Hey, hey, hey. And then Orange's mom was like, okay, let me take that 2,000 out. The mom was like, no. Apple's mom was like, no, can you please leave my house? And Orange's mom was like, give us back the books then. And the mom was literally like, no. She started fighting, she started fussing, and we couldn't search because we don't know where the book was placed, and we just had to leave, guys. When we leave, we immediately knew what they were trying to do, right? So we go to sleep, right? Oh, we go back home. I take my book from the trash can and we go to sleep, and then in the morning we're supposed to go to school. They were like, no, they went to a person, obviously. Me, Orange's mom, Orange as well, as well as my mother, go to a person to go see what's going on. When we get there, the person immediately tells us that this was all a plan. There's no money that was missing. Apple and her mom actually planned this. They wanted Orange alone, and then Orange decided to invite me. So now they had to change the gears or whatever. And she's like, the book that you found in the trash is because they threw it away because they knew that the book that they wanted was not mine. It was actually Orange's. She's like, they planned this. They didn't know how they were going to accuse you guys of stealing. So they decided, no, Apple should go to the shop and leave us. And then Apple's just going to turn on us and say, yeah, they stole it. And they're like, Apple knows what her mom is doing. And she's doing it with her very much willingly. And, you know, they were like, yeah. So they were trying to basically kill Orange, because they have been trying to deal with it. They've been trying to make her go crazy. They have been trying to make her sick. They can't. So they just decided, no, we want to kill her. And whatever traditional healer or whatever witch doctor they went to told them, no, get her book. Like, we'll deal with her when you guys get her book. Unfortunately, Orange is protected, y'all. Orange is protected by the good Lord. And God said, never, not with my child. And yeah, that's why whatever that they were doing never works. And the person also said, as soon as we left, they went on a taxi and went on the first taxi, and they went to that particular witch doctor that they went to. And the witch doctor obviously is lying to them on some, yeah, it's gonna happen, but nothing is gonna happen to you. You know. So I don't know what they did with Orange, because, you know, I was safe. They were not looking for me. And I don't know what they did with Orange. And then the following day, Apple gave back Orange's book. And it was crazy, you know. She gave back Orange's book. She was like, here's your book. I never want to speak to you guys because you guys are thieves. And she went around telling people that we stole $5,000 from my mom. Like, girl, you and your mom are crazy.
You know, at night when you have to turn the lights off in your house and you get to that last light and you switch it off and it's completely dark, and it feels like all of a sudden your house has now become the most haunted house in the world, and you have to make a run all the way back to your bedroom. There might be something to that. Now, when we are doing this, right, we put ourselves in a vulnerable position. And I think anything negative, any kind of spirit that is a negative entity knows this. This is the best time to scare us. And they're trying to see if they could scare us just a little bit to gain entry and to allow them permission to come into our lives. So this is a story I heard out of Rockford, Illinois. There was this girl, and she lived in this bigger house all alone. And it started to get late. She wanted to go to bed. So she starts going through her house, turning off all the lights. She gets to the last light, which is in the living room. And when she hits it off and it goes completely dark, she gets that feeling. Well, she walks through her living room, and as she walks past her kitchen, she turns and kind of glances in, and she sees a woman, like in a white gown, just standing in the kitchen. And she's like, "Who are you? What do you want?" And the woman just starts walking towards her. So she takes off running to her bedroom. She closes her door, locks it, and she calls the police. The police show up, and she says, come inside, like there's a woman in my house. I'm in my bedroom, locked in there. I don't want to come out. So they go through her house, they search it, they don't find anyone. And they said, "Ma'am, are you sure you didn't just see something? Like, are you just tired and maybe it was like a hallucination?" And she goes, "No, I'm for sure there was a woman in my kitchen." So they said, "Well, we can't find anything. You probably are just tired. Why don't you just go to bed?" So they leave, and she goes back up to her bedroom. And when she lays down in bed, she kind of feels like, you know what, maybe that was just, in my head. Maybe I'm just tired and I need to get some sleep. So as she turns around to adjust herself in the bed, there is the woman standing right next to her. And she jumps up, she runs out of her house, And she said as she's in the front of her house, she can see the woman looking out of her window, staring at her.
I absolutely love a good cryptid story, and I recently came across one that is unlike anything I have ever heard of before. So the person telling this story is a diver, and they said all the way down they were followed by a 15-foot shark that kept circling around with curiosity, but never really seemingly making an attempt to attack. Yet, as he went down, he was wondering how much further this shark was willing to go and follow him. Eventually, he gets to the ledge of this very deep, dark chasm. At this point, the shark was still about 25 feet away from him, above him. It was a pretty dangerous venture, and he knew it was not a good idea to keep going down. So he kind of stood there as he zoned out, looking into this chasm, kind of waiting to see what the shark's next move would be. And then he said suddenly the water dropped in temperature, like very distinctly and very rapidly. And then he sees a black mass rising up out of the chasm. He said it floated upward very slowly, and then when it got to the point where light would be able to touch it, he noticed that it was kind of brown in color. This thing was absolutely enormous, and it had like a flat but ragged edged surface to it. It was about the size of a football field. I mean, it's huge. He said it pulsated sluggishly, and he knew it was alive despite the fact that he couldn't make out any limbs or eyes. And he said this thing kept on slowly rising as it pulsated up and above the level that this person was standing at that ledge. He made note that as it rose out, it got increasingly more cold. He said, and then he noticed the shark was completely still, like either paralyzed by cold or fear, but that thing wasn't moving an inch. And then in fascination, he kept watching this thing rise closer until it met the shark. So then this thing makes contact with the shark with its upper surface. And he says that the shark made like a convulsive jolt and then was just sort of absorbed into the surface of this monster. He said he did not move a muscle. He would not dare move as he watched this thing then slowly lower back down deep into the dark chasm. He said as it began disappearing into the darkness, the water began increasing in warmth again. What on earth could that have been? I don't have more context than that. I wish I knew where this was. I know I'm sure you're going to be curious about that. Anyway, I've never heard of anything like that before. So let me know your thoughts in the comments, guys. And if you're new here, follow for more creepy story time.
Let's read some creepy Reddit stories about Randonautica. Not mine, but my boyfriend told me this a few nights ago. He and a few friends used the app when they were in their teens, 16 to 17. It took them down a dirt road in the middle of nowhere in the woods in Texas for a few miles to a barn. There, on the barn's balcony, stood a naked man holding a hook. This man then proceeded to jump down and chases them till they are about half a mile from their car. On the way back to the car, they passed through a smaller shack containing hooks, and one of the group grabbed two. They still have these hooks to this day, because other than that, they thought they had all hallucinated. Apparently, this was in Texas near an area where the Hookman murders happened in the 50s. To this day, my boyfriend wonders if he met a serial killer or just some random psycho, and they wonder what would have happened if they had entered that barn. I remember a few years ago, I went randonauting with my then boyfriend. I can't remember what I put in for the second thing, but the first thing was fortune, and we were led to a super nice neighborhood. I had no idea it even existed. It was so far out of the way, and it felt surreal. We kept driving around, and finally, after getting bored, I think I set it to anomaly or something, and it led us to the driveway of a house nearby. It looked normal, but there were electricity wires hovering at the end of the driveway just above us, right at the point's coordinates. It was normal for most houses in the area we'd lived in, but there was red string tied in a knot on the lowest wire, almost like it was waiting for us. We didn't get out of the car, but it felt weird the whole way back, and we thought we were being followed, so we turned into a gas station. It's so weird because we never could find that rich neighborhood again. Maybe it's just fault of memory, but the whole time something felt off. Went on randonauting with the intent of money. Pin brought near a convenience store with 2 ATM machines inside. So I thought, yeah, right, that's got money in it, but I have to withdraw. But what I saw in front of the convenience store where the actual pin is was unsettling. A man with a paper bag standing on the actual spot, looking at me as I was standing in front of the convenience store. Next to him was a truck with 2 other guys on the phone. As I looked away walking, they were all looking at me, with one of them pointing at me as if they want to run after me. I ran fast and never looked back. A few years back, my friend and I decided to randonaught later at night. We set our intention to something exciting, and it brought us to the train tracks in our neighborhood. As we pulled up, there was an oncoming train and a man who immediately drove his car around the barriers and head on into the train. We freaked out, obviously, and called the police to report it. I think he ended up seriously injured, but lived, fortunately. My best friend and I randonautted like 4 years ago and found this creepy abandoned gas station biking distance from my house at 2 a.m. It still had signs up for 65-cent gas and everything. The building was gone, just gas pumps standing on an empty piece of concrete in the middle of a busy part of town. Kinda cool, kinda creepy. The actual creepy part came when we went looking for that gas station again a couple days later and could not find it anywhere, or even anywhere it could have been. It just disappeared. I used to live in a place with huge organized crime problems. So one day I was testing the app with a friend, and I told him to try it and think of some intention. The location given was in the middle of nowhere, a couple of miles outside the city. I asked him what he thought of, and he said, dead bodies. I told him I wasn't going there at all, so we found other cool places. Fast forward a few months, I moved away, but kept following that city's local news agencies on social media, mainly because it's a hassle to unfollow each one. One day, I read on my feed that a group of volunteers dedicated to look for people kidnapped by criminals had found a few bodies in the exact same location that had been given to us by Randonautica. I sent the article to my friend, and he couldn't believe it either. It was very creepy. Okay, I've never used Randonautica before, but after reading these stories, I kind of want to. I want to see if I see anything scary. Let me know if you've ever used Randonautica and if anything creepy or weird happened to you.
This is called the Leprechaun Museum. Clarissa had just graduated college and she felt free, single and ready to mingle as far from America as possible. She was usually seen wearing a cap that read Dog Mom, despite not having a dog, and wearing a t-shirt that says, your dad is my cardio. Clarissa had a great-great-grandfather who was Irish, so she'd tell anyone who'd listen that Ireland was her spiritual home, even though she'd only flown to Dublin once for a friend's hen do.
That is infuriating.
Yeah. Her Instagram bio read, hot psychic mess, and underneath was the word Gemini with the peace sign emoji.
Germany?
Germany?
Clarissa,
for all her faults, did, however, possess a strange, unnatural ability. The way it manifested would be like this. Clarissa would say something offhand, only for it to come true. She once shouted, drop dead bitch, to her roommate Kelly after she caught her drinking her homebrewed kombucha, and the next day, she fell in a quarry. She once said, go f*** yourself, to her boyfriend. The next day, he masturbated himself to death.
Yeah.
What? Is that possible?
Yeah. These strange mishaps meant Clarissa tried to stay as perky, positive, and as friendly as she could, even if it didn't come naturally to her. Especially as she had plans to live for a winter in Ireland. Dublin, to be precise, back to her roots. She'd been given a job at the Leprechaun Museum as a tour guide. According to TikTok, it was a national institution, and she was proud to be part of Irish history. On her first day, she met her manager, a nice and unattractive man called Sergio McGuinness. He often took calls from his Spanish mother, Valentina, meaning Clarissa was mostly left to her own devices. She learnt all about the puka, Ireland's shapeshifters, the leprechauns and the infamous pots of gold, and about fishermen and the selkies. Clarissa enjoyed her storytelling tours. She liked to ham the tales up for the enthusiastic visitors, adding flourishes and exaggeration to the already outlandish stories where she saw fit. She once said, j'adore les leprechauns, to a particularly dashing Frenchman who came in to escape the rain. On one windy Wednesday in late October, Clarissa was ushering out the last tour group of the day, intending to lock up shortly after. With Samhain approaching, Clarissa used the proper word for Halloween now, under orders from Sergio McGuinness, she waved some kind lesbians from Ohio off into the night and started sweeping. She hummed a Katy Perry tune as she did, trying to ignore a feeling of foreboding. She paused. The lights had gone off. someone was humming the exact same tune back. Hello? She shouted past the massive wooden chair. The humming had stopped. Then, from the shadows, stepped a man. She squinted. Pierre? Clarissa said. The Frenchman. They'd swapped numbers and had a night of passion, but the next morning he said he wasn't interested in anything else. She remembered she'd rolled her eyes and muttered, ugh, bite me. Now here he was. Pierre had a hungry look in his eye. Okay, Pierre, maybe it's time you leave, like get a spice bag. Pierre laughed. Then the smile vanished from his face. He then pounced on Clarissa and tore a chunk of flesh from her arm with his mouth. Oh. Jesus Christ, you're crazy! Ow! I'm just doing what you ask, comme tu me l'as demandé. Shut up, speak English, Jesus! But Pierre carried on chewing. Then he stopped, wiped his mouth, started humming again, and sauntered out the museum. That was close. Clarissa had to be more careful what she said to others. The lights flickered back on. She wrapped her jumper tight around the bleeding wound on her arm. The feeling of foreboding hadn't gone, though. See, that morning, on her way to work, she could have sworn she'd seen her ex-boyfriend, the one who wanked himself into an early grave. Oh, God. But no, obviously she was going crazy. She looked intently into one of the glass cases with a display on Fey shapeshifters. She reread the sign that described how they can change their physical form, including height, weight, and facial features to look like someone else. And at that moment, Sergio McGuinness appeared in the doorway.
Weird.
Clarissa jumped out of her skin. Anyone else want to scare me? Go ahead. Okay. Never mind, I'm on the edge, Sergio. A French guy I made love to once just bit me. This place is creeping me out. Sergio, I thought you were out of town today. See, I was. I forgot to get my... Suddenly, the museum was plunged into darkness again, and that's when Clarissa heard her own voice from across the empty room. This place is creeping me out. Who's that? What? Who's that? The voice mimicked back. Clarissa's heart started to race. It's not funny. Show yourself. Then her mimicked voice changed its tone. It sounded colder, nastier somehow. She could make out a shape of someone coming closer. Oh, I think it is funny. Hey, Clarissa, I've got a message for you. Go to hell.
Oh, no.
As the figure in front of her materialized, she saw in horror its face flit between Troy, her tossing ex, and Kelly, her klepto roommate. Sergio McGuinness was no longer. He was just a body that the shapeshifter had taken over. Shit. It was taunting her, and now... Well, now she felt a strange urge to go out into the night and swim to the bottom of the Liffey.
My mom's spirit came to warn me so I wouldn't be in danger. Have you ever experienced a loved one or a friend who has passed away only for you to have an encounter with them? You've talked to them and you didn't know that they were dead, and this could actually happen a few hours or maybe days or months after they have passed away without you knowing. Well, this is my story time. So I remember at the age of 10 years old, I was on my way back from school, and before I got home, this was like a couple of streets away from our home, my mom came running towards me. She had this look of fear. She was like concerned. I was like wondering why she's running towards me because I'm coming home. So I thought maybe something had happened. She gets to me, she's out of breath, and she tells me to go straight to my grandparents' house, which is her mom and dad's house. I was confused and I asked her, but she said, don't ask any questions, just go to your grandparents' house. When I'm ready for you to come back home, I will give you a ring. So I said okay. I didn't argue any further and I went. My grandparents' house wasn't far from where we live, so I went there. When I arrived there, they looked confused why I was there. I was also confused. I thought my mom would have told them. So I explained to them that my mom said to come there, and when she's ready for me to come back home, she will let me know. She will ring them and let me know. Anyway, I'm sat there watching TV. This is a couple of hours into, watching the TV. Then a phone call came through on the landline. My granddad answered that phone call. He screamed because the police said that someone had broken into our house. They unalived my mother and they were waiting to also unalive me. So my mom's spirit came to save me. She came to warn me not to go home because I would have also ended up, dead just like her. But if you have ever experienced this or know someone who's experienced this, please comment it in this comment section below.
One night, there was a driver driving on US 23 near Cary, Ohio. And he decides he's going to pull over for the night and get some sleep. So he pulls into this rest area and he notices that his truck is the only vehicle there for the night. So he gets in the back of his truck, he lays down, he goes to bed. When all of a sudden he hears a loud bang and his truck begins to shake violently. So he jumps up and he's wondering, what is going on? And it stops. And right at that moment, he notices that his cabin is ice cold, even though it is the middle of summer and it's 90 degrees outside. So he gets out of his truck, and to his surprise, his whole trailer and truck has been completely moved over. And not only that, there is a large dent in his trailer, like something had hit it very hard. And there's significant amounts of damage on the side of his truck. So he gets back in his truck and he calls dispatch. And they say, go ahead and contact 911 and tell them what happened and file a police report. So the police are speaking with him on the phone. They say, hey, it's probably going to be about 30 minutes. We're responding to another call. This is an emergency, right? He says, no. So he gets, he's just sitting in his truck and he's waiting for the police to come now. He decides, what? I need to go inside and use the restroom and, just kind of get some fresh air. So he gets out of his truck and he starts going towards the building when he notices there's a man standing next to the building. And he can't really make out anything of this man, his face, anything that he's wearing. It's just sort of a shape of this man. And all of a sudden he notices this man is pointing at him. And then he starts running right directly at him. And so this driver runs and jumps back in his truck. And he's expecting this guy to come and confront him and come into his truck. But as he turns back and looks out the window, this man is gone. And so he gets in the back of his truck and he grabs his pistol and he's just clenching it, thinking, someone is about to enter the truck and I'm going to have to fight them. When all of a sudden he hears a loud thump, thump, thump on the top of his truck. And all of a sudden he sees a head pop down into his windshield. And this black tongue comes out and it starts licking the windshield. And just at that moment, the police arrive. And this thing, whatever it is, slowly goes back up and disappears. So he's all shaken up. He can't really talk. He gets out of the vehicle and he tells the police, hey, something hit my truck and there's a guy out here. And the police are confused. And he can't understand why they're so confused. And they said, something hit your truck? And he said, yeah. And so the police say, well, come here, show us where, something hit your truck. And he's amazed when he goes out and he sees that there is now no damage on his truck. His truck is still parked in the parking space and hasn't moved. And everything seems fine. So he, gets in his truck and he leaves. And he said he would never return to that rest area again. Now, this next story takes place in Arizona, near Holbrook. This truck driver pulls off the interstate onto some back roads to park his truck for the night. And he gets in the back of his truck and lays down. And all of a sudden he notices this bright light is peering through his windshield. And it's getting brighter and brighter. And he jumps up and he, who is this ridiculous person that's shining their brights into my window? But that's when he notices, when he gets in the front seat, is that it's not a vehicle, it's not a car, but it's this disc-shaped craft. And it is landed right on the road out in front of his truck. And at this time, he notices that his CB radio and all the electronics in his car are going haywire. And the next thing he knows, now he is driving on the highway again, but he's going in the opposite direction. It's now the afternoon, it's daytime, and he's confused about what is going on. So he calls in to dispatch, and dispatch is very angry and like, hey, where have you been? You were supposed to drop that load off 12 hours ago, and you never did. Like, what's going on? And he can't figure out, what happened, because he wasn't supposed to drop the load off until that morning, and now it's the next day, and almost 25 hours had passed from that time when he sees this light in his window.
This encounter happened when I was in my mid-20s, living with my family in Washington State. Most of the strange experiences in my family seem to happen late at night, and this was no exception. It was past midnight on a weekend. I was in my bedroom watching a movie and slowly drifting off to sleep. I had a loud window air conditioner running when I suddenly heard a woman crying outside my bedroom window. At first, I was more annoyed than scared. We lived in a quiet neighborhood, but there was always the occasional neighbor who liked to party late. I checked the clock. It was almost 1:30 a.m., and I had to be up at 6 for work. What really bothered me was how clearly I could hear her crying, even over the noise of the air conditioner. Eventually, I stood up on my bed and looked out the window. The street was completely empty. No people, no movement, just the streetlight glowing. I got annoyed, closed the curtain, laid back down on my bed, and eventually fell asleep. The next thing I knew, my alarm was going off. The next day, my dad and I were outside when I casually mentioned that I heard a woman crying outside my window. He stopped and looked at me and said, "Really? I heard her crying outside my door." As we were talking, my mom drove up, got out of the car, and made her way towards us. She overheard what we were discussing, stopped in her tracks without saying anything, went inside the house, and came back with holy water that our local padre had blessed. She quietly blessed the house and then went about her day. Later, she smiled at me and said, "You're just like your dad." After that, things seemed to calm down. From time to time, when I passed my dad in the hallway, he would casually ask, "Have you heard the woman crying lately?" I'd smile and say, "No." He'd nod and reply, "Me either." It wasn't until later that my dad told me something he hadn't mentioned before, that he had actually heard the crying before I did. He also admitted that at one point he thought he had heard her crying inside his room. Sometimes my mom would overhear our hallway conversations, roll her eyes, and go right back to whatever she was doing. Nothing like that ever happened again, but the quiet understanding between my dad and me stayed.
On February 17th, 2004, shoppers inside of a massive Japanese superstore called Jusco in Wakachi City were suddenly aware of a loud commotion. When they went to investigate, they found a thin young woman with a young baby strapped to her chest, grappling with an older man. Initially, onlookers didn't know what to do. They stood there shocked at what they were seeing. Then the woman yelled out, "Thief!" The man she was fighting with was in his late 60s, and he had pinned the woman and her baby up against this bank of ATMs, and his fists were clenched like he was holding whatever it was he took from her. 3 men from the crowd immediately jumped into action and wrestled the man off of the woman and pinned him to the ground and began trying to pull his hands open to take out whatever he had stolen from this woman, but the man would not unclench his fists. And so these 3 men yelled out to the police that happened to be nearby. They ran over and jumped on top of this guy and handcuffed him, and the man, as he's laying on the ground, is yelling out that he did nothing wrong, and then onlookers would say he began moaning very strangely before he began violently vomiting before falling unconscious. While the police waited for emergency services to show up and take this man to the hospital, they were able to open up his fists and discovered the only thing he was clutching was his own bank card that was now bent in 3 places. The wallet he had on him belonged to him, and the bags that were lying on the ground all around him only contained some pet supplies that he had recently purchased. It did not appear he had actually taken anything from this woman. And speaking of this woman, the police were so caught up in the chaos of the moment that they hadn't even thought to look around for the victim to see if she was okay. So they poked their heads up and start looking around the crowd for this woman, but she's nowhere to be seen. And so they asked the crowd, do we know who she is or where she went? And nobody knew. The police did think it was odd that this woman had walked off without talking to them first, but they figured if she walked away, then everything must be fine. And so they labeled the incident an attempted robbery and they closed the case. The following day, the older man, who became known as Mr. A by police, died at the hospital as a result of heart failure caused by extreme stress. When the police found found out about this, they simply went into the case file, updated it to show the suspect had died, and did not investigate further. But Mr. A's family refused to believe he had just attacked a young woman and her baby. It was completely out of character. He was a gentle retiree who had spent 40 years working for a chemical manufacturer and now was collecting a pension and working part-time as a security guard. He lived with his wife, his children, and his grandchildren, and he lived about a kilometer away from the Jusco, where he had gone that day to get some hamster food for his grandson's hamster. His family pleaded with police to reopen the case and investigate this woman because she must have done something to start this altercation. The police initially resisted, but ultimately conceded and said, okay, we'll check the CCTV camera footage at the Jusco to make sure we didn't miss anything. And what they discovered terrified them. A camera overlooking the ATM bank where this whole scuffle went down picked up this woman about 5 minutes before Mr. A walked into frame. She was standing in a corner just off to the side of the ATMs, and she did appear to have a 2-year-old or 1-year-old strapped to her chest, and she was just standing there motionless with her back to the corner looking down. And then when Mr. A came into frame, he appeared to pull some money out of the ATM. He had bags all over his arms. He turned around after getting his cash and started walking away. And as soon as he does, the woman in the corner suddenly becomes animated. She lifts her head up and walks straight past him, skimming his chest with her hand as she passed. And right after she did that, it was like Mr. A had a reaction to being touched by her, and he instinctively grabbed her arm, and that's when the struggle ensued, and that's when the woman yelled out, "Thief!" although it's clear from the footage that she is the aggressor, not Mr. A. And then at some point, the 3 men jump out of the crowd, they pull him to the ground, the police show up, and then at some point during this chaotic melee, the woman just stands up and meanders her way into the crowd and disappears. Although the police searched every piece of footage in and around this ATM all around the time of the incident, they never found any footage of this woman entering or exiting the Jusco. It was like she just appeared in that corner in order to go after Mr. A and then vanished as soon as it was done. And none of the dozens of witnesses that watched the scuffle take place right in front of them in broad daylight were able to provide any sort of meaningful description of this woman. It was like nobody got a really good look at her. But after reviewing hours and hours of the CCTV footage, the police did find one instance where this woman, for 1 second, looked up at a camera exposing her face. And her face was so unsettling to police that they actually decided not to share the image with the public for an entire year. They were scared that if people saw this image, it would scare them from ever going back to Jusco. This is the image of the woman. As you can see, her face is totally emotionless, her eyes are blank and downcast. Some have compared her face to a death mask, which is a plaster cast of a dead person's face. Other people have said she doesn't even look human. After seeing the CCTV footage, Mr. A's relatives sued the police for detaining him and pinning him to the ground despite his obvious medical distress as a result of whatever this woman did to him. Eventually, they did reach a settlement, but what they really wanted was an explanation for who this woman was. But even after the police released this strange photo to the public, nobody ever came forward, so she was never identified. And it's unlikely she'll ever be identified because the statute of limitations for this case expired in 2011. The case, which is now referred to as the Jusco Phantom, is still very famous in Japan, and it remains a popular topic on long internet chat room threads where people exchange this eerie photograph and speculate about who or what killed Mr. A. Richard Russell, better known as Bebo by his friends and family, was born in 1989 in Key West, Florida, but at the age of 7, he moved to Wasilla, Alaska. He was a standout athlete at Wasilla High School, competing in football and in track and field. After graduating in 2008, he moved to Coos Bay, Oregon, where he briefly attended a community college. While he was there, he met a woman named Hannah Strassner, and in 2011, they got married. And shortly after that, they opened a bakery that they would run together for 3 years. Hannah, who had gone to culinary school, was very detail-oriented and ran the show at the bakery. Bebo, on the other hand, was not professionally trained and was much more laid back and interested in experimenting with new and wild recipes. In 2015, with heavy hearts, they decided to sell the bakery so they could move to Seattle and be closer to Hannah's family. Once they arrived there, Bebo got a job at the SeaTac airport as a ground service agent for Horizons Airline. It was not a job he necessarily wanted, but they needed the cash. After working at Horizons Air for 4 years service as a ramper, someone that moves the luggage in and out of the aircraft, Bebo was given some additional responsibility. They asked him to be on a 2-person tow team. A tow team is in charge of moving airplanes around in between their flights. And so the way this works is one person goes down and drives the actual tow vehicle and hooks that up to the airplane and begins moving it around, and the other person would go up into the cockpit, turn the plane on, and then work a couple of very basic systems to help get the plane to go where it needs to go. The members of a tow team are one of the very few number of people that are allowed to go into the cockpit of an aircraft by themselves. And so Bebo really relished this opportunity, and when he was up there, he found himself fascinated with all the controls, and any chance he got, he would ask a pilot, if they were inside of the aircraft, to teach him what some of these controls were. But one time, Bebo was flipping some of the switches in the cockpit that he was not supposed to touch, that other pilots had told him about, and the pilot of this particular plane caught him doing it, took exception to it, and reported him. But surprisingly, there were no repercussions. It was just really embarrassing for Bebo. Like many of the other ground service agents working at Horizon Airlines, Bebo was generally unhappy with his job. He felt like it was boring, that there wasn't much upward mobility, and that he was criminally underpaid. But there was one redeeming quality of his job, and that was, in virtue of working for an airline, he got all sorts of free airfare. And so not only did he get to fly for free all over the world, he got to fly basically anytime he wanted up to Alaska to visit his hometown and see his family, something that was very important to him. The people that knew Bebo said he had a great sense of humor, he was extremely friendly, and you could always catch him with his head buried in a book. And his coworkers would say he had aspirations to be an officer in the military. And when all those people that knew Bebo the best were asked, why do you think he did what he did on August 10th, 2018? None of them have an answer. On that fateful day at 1:35 p.m. local time, a passenger airplane owned by Horizon Airlines flew into SeaTac Airport where Bebo worked. And so this plane was not scheduled to fly for the rest of the day, so it was taxied to the far north section of the airport to a parking spot called Cargo 1. At 7:15 p.m. that evening, Bebo arrived at Cargo 1 and he climbed inside the empty aircraft and made his way into the cockpit. He followed the startup procedure until the plane was on and the propellers were starting to turn. He hopped out of the plane, got in his tow vehicle, and used it to turn the plane around so its nose was pointed towards the airfield. He moved the tow vehicle out of the way, and then climbed back inside the aircraft, shut it behind him, and got in the cockpit and began taxiing out towards the runway. For the next few minutes, air traffic control bombarded Bebo over the radio, asking him, "What are you doing? This is unauthorized movement. You should not be heading towards the runway right now." But Bebo never responded. Instead, he just continued on until he reached the beginning of the runway, at which point, despite having no flight experience, minus some video games and fiddling with some switches in the cockpit while he was in the tow team, he managed to go full throttle and get this plane careening down the runway and successfully took off. But that was nothing compared to what he did next. Over the course of his 1-hour-long flight, he expertly performed backflips and barrel rolls and these huge loops in the sky, dangerous maneuvers that even expert pilots might risk stalling the plane and crashing. But he didn't. It was like he'd been doing this his whole life. Onlookers on the ground were shocked to see this passenger airline performing these ridiculous stunts so low to the ground that all over Seattle, you had people filming this plane and posting it to social media. So in real time, it was like the world was made aware of Bebo up in the sky. And so people went outside and just watched as he flew around. But the real story is not the aerial stunts that Bebo was pulling in the sky. It was the strange, calm conversation that Bebo had with the air traffic controller the whole time he was up in the sky. The extremely professional, very calm air traffic controller tries to convince Bebo that he really needs to come down and land this aircraft. And he begins telling him where he can go, different airfields, and if he needs to, he can land out in the Puget Sound. But Bebo kind of laughs it off and says, I wasn't really ever trying to land this plane. I just wanted to do a couple maneuvers before I put it down. And so as Bebo soared through the sky, this controller tries in vain to convince Bebo to stop what he's doing, and Bebo's just completely ignoring him and cracking jokes with him and telling him how he just loves the scenery up there and how beautiful it is. And then at one point, Bebo becomes remorseful and he says to the controller that he really hopes he hasn't ruined his day, and he feels really bad for the people that he's inevitably going to hurt. And then in Bebo's most poignant moment, moment, he tells the controller that he's just a broken guy and he's got a couple of screws loose and he didn't know it until now. Towards the end of the flight, Bebo tells the controller that he's going to try for one more barrel roll, and if it goes well, he's going to go nose down and call it a night. The controller tries to convince him that it's still possible to try to land, but at this point, Bebo's not listening. At 8:45 p.m., the nose of the plane was seen pointed straight down at the earth. 1 minute later, at 8:46 p.m., Bebo intentionally crashed into a small island off the coast of Seattle. He was the only fatality in the crash. Here is a condensed version of some of the commentary between Bebo and the air traffic controller, along with some of the real footage of him flying the plane.
I just kind of want to do a couple maneuvers, see what it can do before I put it down, you know?
Approach welcome, final runway 16 right.
Welcome. Man, I'm a ground service agent. I don't know what that is.
There is the runway just off your right side in about a mile. Do you see that?
Yeah, I wouldn't know how to land it. I wasn't really planning on landing it. I got a lot of people that care about me, and it's going to disappoint them to you that I did this. I would like to apologize to each and every one of them. Just a broken guy. Got a few screws loose, I guess. Never really knew it until now. I think I'm going to try to do a barrel roll. And if that goes good, I'll just go nose down and call it a night.
How Bebo was able to take off and fly around and pull these stunts without any formal training remains a mystery. Some people believe he was planning this for a long time, which is why whenever he was in the cockpit, when he was in the tow team, he would ask pilots to explain the different switches and toggles and how to use them, and he would feign that he was just curious, when in reality he was actually trying to learn how to fly the plane. As for the incredible stunts he was doing, it's believed he did learn those in a video game. But even if this is true, that he learned how to fly a plane by asking a couple questions and playing video games, the chances of it working out and actually successfully taking off and doing what he did are astronomically low. Normal people can't do that. And that's why the internet gave Bebo a new nickname to commemorate the fact that basically no one could have done this but him. And so they named him the Sky King.
You can't make this stuff up. Might have known the story of real-life boogeyman.
On September 6, 2006, 51-year-old Susan Kuhnhausen was returning from her job as an emergency room nurse in Portland, Oregon. On the way, she stopped at a hair salon to get her hair dyed. While she waited her turn, she picked up a magazine and a particular quote stood out to her. It said, "I will not live an unlived life. I will not live in fear." At the time, Susan was fighting with her husband, Mike. They had been married for nearly 18 years, and their marriage had become toxic, and Susan had finally gotten the courage up to tell Mike she wanted a divorce, and Mike did not want a divorce. And so they had these bitter, awful fights, and Susan was just looking for things to latch onto, and this type of quote gave her motivation to follow through with this very difficult decision. About an hour later, with her hair now a slightly different color brown, she hopped back in her car and drove the last couple of miles home to her quiet little neighborhood. She pulled into the driveway of her one-story Cape Cod home with their gray picket fence around it. She went in the back door into their mudroom, and right away she saw a note next to the microwave that her husband had left, because at this time they were still living together. And the note just said, "Sue, I've had trouble sleeping. I've gone to the beach. I'll see you in a couple of days." She put the note down and then unlocked the door that led into the house, which was into the kitchen. And as soon as the door opened up, she heard the beeping sound of their security alarm. And then she walked all the way through the house to the front door. She unlocked it, went outside, and then checked their mail, and then went back inside the house. After she got back inside and had shut and locked the front door behind her, she kicked off her shoes and then began walking across the house towards the kitchen. She got about halfway there when she looked over to her left, and she noticed the first floor bedroom that they used as a guest room was really dark. And every morning before she left for work, she would open all the curtains around the house. And so in the evening, the sun would come into the house and it would be nice and bright. And so she's thinking to herself, did I forget to open the curtains in that room? Because it shouldn't be that dark. And as she's staring at the room, a man she didn't recognize walked out from behind the bedroom door and started walking towards her. He was medium height, medium build. He had a hat pulled down over his eyes. He had yellow rubber gloves on, and he was holding a hammer. And he began walking right towards her. For many people, the sight of a stranger inside of your home carrying a hammer would be enough to prompt you to turn around and run out of your house. but not Sue. She had been an emergency room nurse for the past 30 years, and in that time, she had done things like crack open people's ribs to massage their hearts, she'd administered IVs and thrashing patients that were suffering from withdrawals, and she and the other nurses she worked with trained regularly in self-defense, because you just never knew what was going to happen in the ER. You needed to be ready to slip chokeholds and defend yourself. And so here Sue was, staring down this intruder in her house with 30 years of preparation for this moment. And so Sue ran at this guy faster than he was coming at her, and it caught him off guard. She figured if she could just get up close to him, the power of the hammer strikes would be less. And so she rams into him, and she's about 5'5" and significantly outweighed him. He's about 5'9", maybe 200 pounds. And so she rams him into the wall. He hits her in the head once with the hammer, but it wasn't enough to subdue her or even knock her down. She barely felt it. And so she's holding on to him and she's screaming at him, "Who are you? What do you want?" Because there was a part of her that thought, this is a burglary. I'll just give you what you want. But the guy didn't say anything. And so Susan grabbed him and pushed even harder against the wall. And the man would say 2 words. It was the only 2 words he said the entire time. And it was, "You're strong." And Susan, when she heard that, it was like an adrenaline rush. She knew this guy was not trying to rob her. He was just trying to kill her. And she thought, no, I'm gonna live. And she managed to wrestle the hammer away from him while pinning him against the wall, and then smashed him in the head 3 times with this hammer before he managed to get it back. But when he reached for the hammer, she grabbed his throat and began choking the life out of him. The man immediately went for his throat to get her hand off of him, so he was not trying to attack her. And Susan realized that she had him on the defensive, and she grabbed tighter and tighter around his throat. She moved her other hand up and really started crushing his windpipe. And then she screamed at him, "I'll call an ambulance if you tell me who sent you." And the man looked at her and just grunted at her. And so she continued to squeeze harder and harder until his face turned purple and his eyes rolled back. And she knew as an emergency room nurse, if she continued, she would kill him. And she wasn't really prepared to do that. And so she threw him to the ground. She turned and began to run towards the front door. But this guy jumped up and leapt after her, grabbed her by the ankle and tripped her to the ground. When she landed, she rolled over onto her back, and right on top of her is this guy wielding the hammer, and he's about to bring it down on her. And so she instinctively just shot up. She sat up as fast as she could, and she bit down as hard as she could on the inner part of his upper leg. She bit so hard she tore through the fabric. And the guy screamed out in pain. He couldn't even hit her with the hammer. He began staggering back, at which point she released the bite, got up onto a knee, and then bit him again on the side of his rib cage as hard as she could, once again tearing through the fabric. And so now this guy is howling at the top of his lungs, at which point Sue grabs him and throws him to the ground, but she falls with him, and she lands directly behind his back. And he's still trying to grab her, and he's got the hammer, and he's trying to hit her. And so she reaches out and puts her arm over his throat and puts him in a wicked chokehold, one that he was not getting out of. And so the guy is trying to fight and get his neck out of the chokehold, but Susan decided that this guy, he's not going to talk, he's not going to tell me what he wants, he's here to kill me, so I'm going to kill him first. And she proceeded to choke him to death. And once he stopped moving, she calmly stood up, looked down, knew he was dead. She grabbed his hammer and then calmly walked out the front door, walked to her neighbor's house, knocked on the door, and then her neighbor comes up and sees Sue just standing there with her clothes tattered and she's all bruised and bloodied, but she looks like she's totally okay. And the neighbor asks Sue, "What are you doing? What's going on? Why do you have that hammer?" And Sue would tell her that, "Well, I had an intruder and he tried to kill me, so I killed him. And I need to use your phone to call the police." And so her neighbor's like, "Okay, come on in and use my phone." And so Sue walks in with her hammer in hand and calmly calls the police and tells them what happened. Police and paramedics show up and they go inside of Sue's house and they confirm that her attacker was in fact dead. And her attacker turned out to be 59-year-old Ed Haffey, who was a Vietnam veteran with a long rap sheet. They discovered Ed's backpack inside of Susan's house, and in it was a notebook that contained instructions for what to do after he killed Susan. And one of those instructions was to call Mike. It turns out this Mike was Susan's husband. He had paid Ed $50,000 to kill his wife. And Mike, earlier in the day, had gone to the house and allowed Ed in and told him where to go and where to wait. And then on his way out, he had written that note saying, "I'll see you in a couple of days." When police brought Mike in, he initially denied all charges and said he had nothing to do do with this, but he would eventually confess and then would be sentenced to 7 years in prison for soliciting to murder his wife. Although Mike never gave his exact motivations for why he actually did this, he would have been ruined financially during this divorce, but if Susan were to die, he would inherit the house. Immediately after his sentencing, Susan sued Mike for $1 million, claiming she wanted to make sure he didn't have any more money so that he couldn't go hire another hitman to finish the job. Susan didn't have to worry for very long though, because Mike would die shortly thereafter in prison. As for Susan, she never faced any criminal charges and in fact was hailed as a hero in the wake of the attack. In 1974, Jean-Claude Romand enrolled in medical school in Lyon, France. He was a model student who excelled despite the notoriously brutal course load. In 1980, he married his girlfriend, and shortly after that, they had 2 kids, a boy and a girl. In 1983, he officially became a doctor and landed a great job as a researcher at the World Health Organization in Geneva. His focus was on finding new medicines to treat arteriosclerosis, also known as heart disease. His wife would proudly tell her friends that her husband was a super doctor who worked quietly in a neon-lit lab in Geneva to develop all these incredible treatments. From the outside looking in, Jean-Claude's life looked perfect, but looks can be deceiving. In the early morning hours of Monday, January 11th, 1993, Jean-Claude's best friend, Luc, received a call informing him there had been a terrible accident. In the night, a boiler had caught fire inside of Jean-Claude's house, killing his wife and his children. Jean-Claude had barely escaped alive, but when he got to the hospital, he had slipped into a coma. The 2 men had been friends for nearly 20 years. They were both doctors, they both got married at almost the exact same time, their kids had grown up together, and now Jean-Claude's family had been completely destroyed. Later that day, when Luc arrived at the hospital to see his friend, he was met with 2 policemen standing outside of his room, barring anyone from going inside. And when they realized Luc was his best friend, the policeman said, "Hey, can we actually pull you aside and talk to you about Jean-Claude?" And so Luc was confused, but he walked over and sat at a table with the 2 officers, and they proceeded to tell him that the fire that had killed Jean-Claude's family had not been an accident, and Jean-Claude was not a doctor. Jean-Claude had enrolled in medical school in Lyon back in the 1970s, but he failed to show up for his first year exam. And without passing that exam, you can't advance in medical school. And so the school allowed him to retake the year. And so Jean-Claude did that for 12 consecutive years. All the while, he told his friends and family that he was following normal medical studies, and eventually he told them he had become a doctor. Instead of going to Geneva to discover new medicines for heart disease, Jean-Claude would drive around the border area between France and Switzerland and periodically go to the World Health Organization's Public Information Center and would just walk around the lobby and read pamphlets before going home again. When Jean-Claude went on overseas business trips, he would actually just leave his house, hop on the highway, and stop at a motel, stay there for a couple of days, and then return with gifts. He lived off money from the sale of his student apartment in Lyon that his parents had bought for him. When the money ran out, he asked his friends and family to give him their life savings so he could invest them into these schemes that he knew about because he was a UN employee. And because he's this very successful, reputable doctor, people agreed and gave him their money. But by late 1992, some of his victims were asking for their money, and he didn't have it. And so some of these people began doing some research on Jean-Claude, and they found his name was not listed on the World Health Organization's staff list. By January of 1993, Jean-Claude knew it was only a matter of time before he was exposed. And to this point, he has been living this life for almost 20 years. His wife, his kids, his friends, his parents, everybody, he has told that he's the successful doctor, and that's all about to come crashing down. And the way he handles it is he drives to his parents' house and he kills his parents and their dog, and then drives back to his house and kills his family, takes sleeping pills, and then lights the house on fire. But firefighters were able to get to him and pull him out before he could take his own life. And so after he regained his strength, he was taken into custody and he made a confession. He was convicted of murder in 1996 and given a life sentence. But in 2015, he became eligible for parole, and in 2019, he was released.
I need to tell you guys this ghost story. This story was sent to my DMs, but the sender didn't get back to me on whether they wanted to remain anonymous or not. So if you're listening and this is your story and you want people to know, tag yourself in the comments. Also, if you have a story and you want to send it to me, you can send it to my DMs, but the easiest thing is to just use my email in my bio. Okay, let's get started. This happened when I was still a child, approximately 5 to 6 years of age. I did not know at the time, but I was suffering from nightmare disorder when I was a child, experiencing about 3 to 4 nightmares a night. Which scarred me quite horribly over the years. I have another story associated with these experiences that I cannot make sense of to this day, But that is not the aim of this post. The encounter I would like to talk about happened in my dream. I happened to be standing in a pure white tunnel, just empty, nothing anywhere. I decided to walk. I was walking for approximately 10 minutes before I reached a person who was tied to a chair from a distance. Okay. I decided to keep on walking. I could finally get his facial features down at this point. Snake-like eyes, raven black hair, but apart from that, a very normal-looking person. Apart from having snake eyes, totally fine. His appearance was scary, but his aura that I could feel from him was very comforting, and I was not afraid, despite the superficial appearance of his. From one moment to another, I blinked, and we switched places. Oh, so he tricked you. Oh, so you've been swindled, you've been tricked. Okay, got it. I was now tied to the chair where he was tied before, and he was standing where I initially stood. He smiled. Don't do that. He smiled, whispered to me something in a language I did not understand, and then handed me something circular and told me in my native language to not, under any circumstance, look at the object he handed me before he goes away from my line of sight. I woke up, never actually truly getting a look at what he handed me. I just know it was something small and circular. Here is when the story takes a turn. Here? I was a very extroverted child, very happy to be in the presence of others at all times. Very active, very dynamic, although I was estimated to not be particularly gifted intellectually. Right after this dream happened to me, my nightmare disorder completely evaporated out of thin air. What? And I stopped dreaming altogether. What do you mean? What do you mean? You met this strange man in one of your night terrors and he gave you this disc and he said, here you go. Don't look at me. I'm gonna leave now. And all of a sudden, what do you mean? Right after this dream happened to me, my nightmare disorder completely evaporated out of thin air and I stopped dreaming altogether. I experienced, at best, one dream per year at this point. One dream per year? The dramatic turn was not any different when this dream ended. My entire personality changed from what I was described above to an introverted, reserved child who started performing immensely well academically. I cannot explain the sudden and rapid change in my personality, save to say I do not know who this person in my dream was, but I certainly do not wish to meet him again. Any thoughts about my dream and the surreal effects it had on me would be appreciated. What do we think? To be completely honest, I don't know that I've ever heard about something like this happening, and I read and listen to a lot of creepy things or supernatural or ghost stories or folklore. I listen to a lot of it. I don't know that I've ever heard of anything like this happening. Dream people, yeah. Night terrors, yes. This specific thing, I don't know. If you have ever heard about something like this happening or have read somewhere about this happening or have experienced it yourself or have some sort of explanation, please put it in the comments because this is going to bother me. It has wiggled like a worm inside of my brain and I'm not gonna be able to stop thinking about this.
So, according to the tour guide, for a while the stories about Amber Court weren't about ghosts at all. They were about a woman. Nobody could agree on her name. Some people call her the Lotus Woman. Some called her Auntie Lotus. Others just said the lady with a flower. The tour guide just called her the one on the 7th floor. But everyone agreed on the same basic things. She lived in Amber Court, and people went to see her when they had absolutely nothing left to lose. And she always had a lotus flower with her. The lotus means rebirth, purity rising up out of the mud, hope. And that hits different for people who felt like they were drowning, people who'd lost their savings. But according to the legend, the lotus wasn't symbolic at all. It was a vessel. The tour guide said she had trained a jinn, bound it, and the lotus flower that was where she kept it. That's why she always had it with her. And that is why people said it sometimes looked fresh and white and other times looked old and dried out. The flower was the container. The jinn was inside. And when desperate gamblers came to her begging for help, she'd let them sit with her, ask them questions, figure out if they were worthy. Sometimes she'd turn people away, but the ones she accepted, she'd help them. And by help, I mean she'd send her jinn with them to the casino, invisibly, to tilt things just slightly in their favor. Not jackpots, not miracles, just enough. Enough to win back what they lost. But nothing is free, right? She had rules. You couldn't come back twice in a row. You couldn't be greedy. You couldn't blame her if you lost. And the most important rule, once you accepted her help, you could never deny it. You couldn't pretend you did it all alone. People said if you broke those rules, your luck wouldn't just go back to normal. It would turn. And I mean turn like something was actively working against you. Like you'd made an enemy of something that didn't forget. The tour guide told a story about this one guy. I'll call him Wei. Wei had been gambling for 3 nights straight. And not fun gambling, desperate gambling. By the 3rd night, he'd lost everything. He was staying at Amber Court, and that's where he heard about this woman. Knock 3 times and wait. Wei went at 2 a.m. because that's when desperate people make their decisions. The door opened slowly. She was older than he expected, and on the table between them, a single lotus flower. And she asked her questions, and then she said, "Go, come back after." And Wei won that night. So the next evening, he went back to Amber Court to thank her, to pay her. He knocked 3 times and waited. The door was unlocked. He pushed it open and the unit was empty. The table was bare, just a faint water ring where the vase had been. Wei left money anyway, locked the door behind him, and left. 3 days later, Wei drove past Amber Court again. And something was different. Her unit and 3 units next to it had been chained shut. He asked a security guard what happened. The guard shrugged. Management sealed them. Don't know why. But Wei heard the rumors later. She was dead. Nobody knew how. Nobody knew exactly when. Some said she'd been sick. Some said something else. But what everyone agreed on was this: she hadn't released the jinn. Whether she died too suddenly, or forgot, or simply couldn't, the jinn was still bound, still trapped in that building. But now there was no master, no lotus flower to contain it. It was stuck in Amber Court. The hauntings people talk about, the famous ones, they say they all started after she disappeared. And the tour guide explained, some people think it's not multiple ghosts. It's one jinn, trapped and raging, manifesting in different ways throughout the building. So the 7th floor, her floor, that's where it's strongest. People who stay there say they feel watched constantly, like the walls are leaning in, like something is standing just behind you, breathing on your neck. But when you turn around, nothing. There's a room on that floor where people say mirrors don't work right. Your reflection lags, moves when you don't. And sometimes there's a woman standing behind you in the glass, wearing red, no face. Some people think it's a separate ghost. The lady in red, they call it. But some think it's the jinn. And if this one is angry, if it's trying to get attention, trying to get someone to release it, it's going to show itself however it can.
Are there dinosaurs in the Arizona mountains? Now, going back to the 40s, there have been reports of people encountering these strange dinosaur-like creatures. The most recent sighting comes from a man named Joseph, who lived in Phoenix. Now, he said one weekend, him and his friends decided they were going to go camping. And they went to this spot out past the Superstition Mountains near the Tonto National Forest. He said they drove down this desert dirt road and they found this clearing. So they set up camp for the night, and as the sun went down, he said it was a nice clear night. You could see the moon and the stars, and everything was going great. Well, later that night, they decide to turn in, and they go into their tents. As they were falling asleep to the sounds of coyotes howling, they noticed that it went quiet. Something happened to the coyotes and scared them off. That's when they began to hear these strange screams that were sort of echoing through the canyon. And about 15 to 20 minutes later, they began to hear something moving through the desert and going through the brush. And that's when something crashed into their tent, knocking it over. And as they struggled to get out, they notice this mule deer that is injured, and it's on the ground. And it's just moving around and thrashing everywhere like it's terrified. Right behind it, they see something come out of the desert that they described as a giant-looking crocodile if it had two human legs and was walking upright. This thing lunged towards this deer. And as it was distracted, they took off running to their SUV. But soon, this thing turned its attention on these three individuals, and it chases them to their vehicle. They get inside, and this thing is trying to get in. So they started honking the horn. They started screaming and making all kinds of ruckus. And eventually this thing got scared and it ran off back into the desert. Now, Joseph said that he grew up on the reservation.
The idea that someone could unalive a person and have no recollection of doing so is incredibly scary to me. This is something psychiatrists have been trying to figure out for decades now. Is Ambien a legitimate reason that someone might do such a thing, or is it just being used as an excuse to get away with it? There are really only a few of these cases that defense teams actually used Ambien as an argument for why it happened, but that doesn't mean that hundreds of other criminals haven't tried to claim that they can't be held responsible for their crimes because of Ambien. One of the cases argued to be committed because of Ambien was of a woman who bludgeoned her husband and then tied a bag around his head. She had been prescribed Ambien due to a recent struggle with insomnia after her husband suffered a stroke and was left disabled. On the night of the unaliving, she had taken multiple doses of Ambien and claimed to remember hitting her husband with a metal bar, but said that it felt like a fragmented dream. The jury in her trial convicted her of second-degree unaliving after the defense argued that the side effects of Ambien played a role in her crime. The other two cases involve a man stabbing his wife and another man beating his female housemate with a hammer, in which both of those victims passed away. And both of the men claimed to have no idea what they were doing because of Ambien. Another case of this was actually a mass shooting that took place at a nursing home. A 45-year-old man named Robert Stewart walked into a rehabilitation center and opened fire, unaliving 8 people, 7 of which were elderly residents and 1 nurse. Robert's attorney argued that he had no memory of the shooting because he had taken 12 times the amount of Ambien he was supposed to, along with other medications. But because his estranged wife worked at this facility, the jury wasn't buying it. They weren't completely sold on the idea that it was premeditated, but they also believed that he knew what he was doing, and he was convicted of 8 counts of second-degree unaliving. Also, not so fun fact, Tiger Woods was on Ambien the night he crashed his car after his wife confronted him with all of the cheating allegations. So, there's that.
We're going to cover another really strange case today, but this time it is involving a district attorney who went missing in 2005. Ray Gregar was born on October 9th of 1945 in Cleveland, Ohio. Ray would earn his law degree from the Western Reserve University School of Law. He was married to a woman named Barbara Gray, and they had 1 child together named Laura. Early on in his career, he took a job as a prosecutor, and there he specialized in cases of SA and unlawful taking of people's lives. Then in 1980, he and his wife decided to move to Pennsylvania because she had gotten a job at Pennsylvania State University. He at first opted to just be a stay-at-home dad, but then the current district attorney who was working, David E. Grine, offered him an assistant position. He did end up taking that, but then David E. Grine decided not to rerun for re-election, and so he decided to run, and he won by 600 votes. Initially, this position was part-time, and then in 1996, he positioned for it to become a full-time job, and he did win this. He kept winning his re-elections until 2001, but in 1998, he ran into some hot water when he refused to press charges against a Penn State assistant football coach, Jerry Sandusky. Jerry was being accused of crimes against children, and Ray decided he didn't want to press charges against him at that time. But 13 years later, he would finally be charged with these crimes against children. So thankfully, he's behind bars. But in 2004, Ray decided he did not want to run for re-election, and he wanted to he wanted to quit law completely. He wasn't even going to do private practice or anything like that. He made this announcement in December of 2005. This was shortly after his 60th birthday. And according to his family, he was looking forward to retirement and just kind of relaxing, but then things would get weird. At this point in time, Ray had divorced his first wife and been remarried a couple of times, and at the time of his disappearance, he was actually living with his girlfriend, who was an employee of the Centre County District Attorney's Office. He was living with her. Her name was Patty Fornicola, I believe is how you pronounce her name, and yeah, they were living together. On April 15th of 2005, Ray called Patty at about 11:30 in the morning, and he told her that he was driving through Brush Valley area, north of Center Hall. I'm not familiar with the area, so I don't know where this is, but Ray then never came home. He just didn't show up again. And then later that evening, Patty would report him missing. It wouldn't be until the next day that the investigators found his Mini Cooper, his red Mini Cooper, in a parking lot of an antique store in Lewisburg. Inside the car was Ray's county-issued cell phone, but his laptop and his keys were gone, as well as his wallet. His wallet was also gone. Now, while there was no sign of foul play at the time, his family did notice the location. It was in a very strange place. It was between two bridges near a river. This is odd because in 1996, Ray's brother had taken his own life in a very similar place, and this really worried his family. Investigators looked into his bank accounts, but nothing had been used, and it looked as if Ray had simply vanished. But then on July 30th, a fisherman in that river found his laptop. The laptop was in rough shape, and the hard drive was missing. So really there was nothing that they could pull evidence-wise from this laptop. It wouldn't be until 2 months later that the hard drive was found 100 yards away from where the laptop was originally found. The hard drive was really damaged. There was no pulling any information off of it, and they did send it to the FBI, but it appears as if nothing was found on this hard drive. And again, this led nowhere. Strangely enough, in 2009, the police revealed that before he went missing, someone had used their home computer and searched how to wreck a hard drive or how to fry a hard drive, water damage to notebook computers. So it seems as if someone might have been looking into how to destroy this laptop. And that's really the end of the case, the evidence at least. No one knows where Ray went. He just kind of vanished. In 2011, on July 25th, 2011, his daughter did ask for him to be declared deceased. And weirdly enough, there was a man found that day that was very similar to Ray, found in Utah. He had like the same wrinkles and like just kind of the same. He looked the same, and his fingerprints were sent, but it wasn't Ray. So since July 25th of 2011, Ray has been declared passed, but no one knows what actually happened to him. There are a lot of theories that are out there about what exactly happened to Ray, and the main one seems to, and the one that police believe too, is that he simply took his own life. His brother had done the same, and he was, like, his car was found in kind of the same area where his brother had taken his life, but his family strongly disagrees. They say that he was really looking forward to retirement, and this is just not something that he would do. He also never had like a history of mental health issues or depression. Like, he didn't have any of those thoughts, so they just found it strange that he would suddenly do this to himself. Another theory is that he simply wanted a new life and decided to start over. He has been cited several times across the country. Notably, a police officer saw him watching a baseball game at one point. People also believe that he might have gone to Europe because he was fluent in Russian, semi-fluent in Russian, and fluent in Slovenian. He also had family in Slovenia, so maybe he decided to go there. And the third theory is that there's a more sinister play going on here. He was linked to the unsolved passing of Jonathan Luna, who was an assistant U.S. attorney. That man was found in Lancaster County in a creek in December of 2003. Ray was also involved in a police operation busting a heroin dealing ring, and some people suggest that maybe those guys were involved in his disappearance, but apparently police did look into that and there was no evidence that he was involved with that. It seems as if Ray just kind of disappeared off the face of the earth and no one knows where he is, and he's been gone for so long. But what are your thoughts on this? Let me know down in the comments and follow for more true crime.